Move it, troopers! On the double! Fire!
Hey guys, this is Luke from the Scoundrels Cantina, and in this video I'll be talking about what we the Scoundrels believe is wrong with Disney's Star Wars, The Force Awakens, the sequel Star Wars Trilogy, and basically everything we don't agree with regarding this amazing franchise. Keep in mind that everyone is allowed to have their own opinion, and this video will have a lot of ahs in it, along with quite a few facts about a plethora of things. If any of you have a hard time dealing with different opinions, I really suggest you don't watch this. This is a video we didn't want to do, but we feel like a weight will be lifted after we get everything out in the open, and while I'm even starting with this, I already feel better for starting to get it out. Also, we'll try to keep this as reasonable as possible with minimum hate. Before you immediately go clicking on that like or dislike button, as well as commenting something, please watch the whole video and then if possible tell us what you think without going off the rails. Don't take anything you hear personally, because this is not an attack on you if you like something that we're criticizing and saying that it's no good, because after all, it's just our opinion and nothing more. No matter what we say here regarding anything, you keep on liking, loving and enjoying what you enjoyed before, because it's not our intention to ruin it for anyone. We do have a few criticisms for some things that fans do and say, but we'll get to that in a moment. Anyway, let's begin. Starting off with Disney taking over Star Wars, which happened in 2012. There is a video with George Lucas and Kathleen Kennedy where they discuss the future of Star Wars in Disney's hands, and it almost seems as if Kathleen is constantly saying everything to convince George that selling to Disney and making her the boss is a great idea and guarantees a bright future for the beloved franchise.
It's the best company possible to take Star Wars into the future.
What she said is completely true about Disney, and it all sounded great at first, but what she ended up doing simply disgusts us.
Lies! Deceptions!
Quite a few promises have been given from her in this talk, some of which are:
The main thing is to protect these characters, make sure that they still continue to live in the way that you created them.
But as you can see, that didn't really go well, and the best way to protect those characters is by leaving them alone and creating brand new ones, which the expanded universe, now known as Legends, is famous for. George Lucas said that he's moving all the stories from Star Wars to the new Disney Lucasfilm, aka Kathleen Kennedy, for her to take care of it.
And obviously we have hundreds of books and comics and everything you could possibly imagine. So, you know, I sort of moved that treasure trove of stories and various things to Kathy, and you know, I have complete confidence that she's going to take them and make great movies.
We are absolutely going to make Star Wars movies.
Yeah, thanks a lot for taking care of Star Wars. We just have to say this, but we really dislike Kathleen Kennedy and the number of times she has pissed us off with her agenda pushing, which is most notably seen almost everywhere in Disney Star Wars.
And he writes amazingly fierce and independent women.
And not to mention that her only goal is to make as much money as possible based on nostalgia without a shred of care for the actual story. Her agenda pushing starts off with her always having to be a main character which is a female, and eventually getting a whole Star Wars show where almost every single character is a female. Don't get us wrong, we have nothing against female characters, and we believe that both men and women should be equal, but regarding Star Wars and equality, I guess we should have at least a TV show with only male characters, which, by the way, we don't want. So this is all we're gonna say about her and her agendas. Star Wars is no place for that stuff because it never suffered from inequality until people got delusional and started to talk nonsense. The world would simply be a better place without all of that stuff, so yeah, end the video guys.
This party's over.
Boy, I wish. Now, we're not gonna go into too many details with this, but as soon as Star Wars was bought by Disney, our favorite TV show to this day has been cancelled, which is Star Wars The Clone Wars, as well as a few awesome games which we looked forward to for years, which are Star Wars 1313, a Darth Maul game, and Star Wars The Force Unleashed. Although it's not completely Disney Lucasfilm's fault regarding the Clone Wars, because Cartoon Network complicated a lot of things for them. That's not even the worst part of it all, because the entire expanded universe of Star Wars has been completely thrown away, and that's like, let's say about 90% of Star Wars. For those who don't know, the EU is basically everything apart from episodes 1 to 6 and the Clone Wars, which is all the games, books and comics. Basically everything was no longer officially part of Star Wars and was not going to be expanded upon anymore, except for Star Wars The Old Republic. Thank God that they at least left us the Old Republic MMORPG game. Now, when you look at it from a business perspective, which is the only perspective Disney Star Wars has, it makes sense to throw away everything so that they can do their own thing and make money. And yes, everything is about money, sadly, and it pains us to see that almost all the stories have become so meaningless, basically going in circles and purely based on nostalgia. We think that it would have been way better if they didn't throw away so many already existing stories and made them non-canon, but instead did actual movies on that stuff, the same way Marvel does movies on already existing stories. Not to mention that Marvel is very successful with their stuff, even though some of us already know what happens in their movies. We think that Marvel is doing way better than Star Wars in every way, especially since the fans are not divided into so many groups as they are with Star Wars. Thanks, Lucasfilm. Now, the new Disney canon is basically a Frankenstein version of the Legends canon with all sorts of parts taken from existing stories, creating nothing new except more money. If only we would see any of that on the big screen instead of the constant reboots of the original trilogy. So much for the promise of taking care of Star Wars. Luckily, we have Grandmaster Dave Filoni to keep Star Wars alive as much as possible, as much as he could, by bringing the Clone Wars back for Season 6 and giving us some of the best episodes we have ever seen, as well as some other unfinished episodes which would have been complete if not for the new order of things. Ever since Star Wars was bought by Disney, Dave hasn't failed us yet. Just so that there is no confusion, Disney doesn't actually control what happens with Star Wars content, it all comes from the new Lucasfilm of which Kathleen Kennedy is in charge. Disney Star Wars is just what we and other people call it because they own it. In 2014, Star Wars Rebels started to air, and at first it seemed childish and boring, but very soon it started to be very good and has been awesome ever since. One of the main reasons is because the original crew, including Grandmaster Dave Filoni, were behind the series and kept the old originality in Star Wars from the pre-Disney days. They also tried making it be a continuation of the Clone Wars as much as they could, and we thank them for that because it was awesome. The only cons to it are the fill-in episodes, which are not actually bad, but simply not good enough for it to fill in 70% of the season. But hey, at least Rebels is good even with the less good stuff story-wise. Although the Clone Wars never had those kinds of problems. Anyway, moving on to the next topic. Star Wars Episode 7 The Force Awakens was set to come out in theaters in December 2015, and I gotta tell you, we were very excited. About a month before the movie came out, Lucasfilm announced that George Lucas saw the movie and thought that it was great, which of course hyped us even more because he's the creator of the Star Wars we know and love. Of course that was a lie, so that even more people would watch the movie. George would later say in an interview on Charlie Rose that he doesn't like it.
So I have to make the decision on my own that it's time for me to move on. So it wasn't like they were taken away from me or they were and they felt they knew, they wanted to do a retro movie. I don't like that. Every movie I worked very hard to make them different. I make them completely different with, different planets, with different spaceships, with different, to make it new.
So are you at peace with this?
Yeah.
We think it's pretty obvious that George really regrets selling it to the white slavers.
These are my kids. So
All those Star Wars films.
all the Star Wars films.
They were your kids.
Yeah, well, they are right. I loved them. I created them. I'm very intimately involved in them, and obviously to
And
sell
you
them
sold
off,
them.
I sold them to the white slavers that take these things and.
Say what you want about him, but we think he's a very creative genius, and his movies, TV shows and games brought complete and utter joy to us, and not only that, but with him, we always saw something completely new and original. Although we can't say the same for most of Disney's Star Wars. Now, for those who don't know, we have a personal headcanon view on Star Wars, which we slowly came up with after Disney threw away the expanded universe and replaced it with their stories. Official canon is what they are constantly making today and filling in the stories, and the expanded universe is what they basically threw out and are replacing it with their canon. Headcanon, as we like to call it, is basically what we call liking Star Wars in your own way. In our headcanon, most of the expanded universe, now known as Legends, coexists with official canon stories because we believe that there is no reason why most of it can't fit together, but only before Return of the Jedi. The reason for that is because after Return of the Jedi, the stories go into completely different directions and simply can't coexist. To simplify it, in our headcanon the stories go from the beginning of the galaxy through the Old Republic era, all the way up to episodes 1 to 6 with Return of the Jedi being the happy ending in the Star Wars story. Of course, all the games, comics, TV series and novels fit into our head continuity, but only which are before Return of the Jedi. Why we're saying this is that even though we were never going to consider The Force Awakens as canon for ourselves because of Return of the Jedi and its happy ending, aka the ending of the story for us, we were still dying of excitement to see The Force Awakens. But oh boy, we were still so disappointed. It was even stupid to tell anyone that we hated the movie because of how hyped we were before we saw it. Personally, episode 6 means a lot to us because of how the redemption story played out, how evil has been destroyed, and how the galaxy, thanks to the Chosen One, can finally be in peace and happiness. We believe in God and the eternal happiness that he promises, and we can clearly see what influenced George Lucas when he was making Return of the Jedi, or at least we like to think so since it feels that way to us. Now, the Jedi Knights have always wanted there to be balance in the Force, yet they were purely on the light side of it. We personally take that as if the balance actually means only light and no darkness, because of how light side users always longed for the balance. Now, we might be completely wrong about this, but this is simply the way we look at it, and it's our opinion.
Do you believe you are the Chosen One?
How can I know?
I can tell you what I believe. I believe you will bring balance to the Force, that you will face your demons and save the universe.
Because of what episode 6 means to us, we were never too fond of the post-Return of the Jedi expanded universe, because what happens there basically demolishes and makes episodes 1 to 6, everything that happened before them and in between them, totally irrelevant. The main reason is because then it's going in circles and history is being repeated and nothing has changed, as if everyone fought for nothing. The Force Awakens does the same thing the post-episode 6 expanded universe does, but in a much worse way. The expanded universe after episode 6 is probably the most creative and bizarre part of Star Wars, and after watching The Force Awakens we have a newfound respect and enjoyment for it. Now, episode 7 is without a doubt an almost totally copy-pasted movie of A New Hope. It took episode 4's story, vehicles, characters, and basically repainting them. And this is not even a metaphor, they basically reversed the TIE Fighter colors, changed the X-Wing colors, and added a few minor differences. They are basically doing that with The Last Jedi now as far as we can see, and of course adding those minor differences with them. We wouldn't have a problem with the vehicle designs and all other designs if the story was new and not rehashed. So don't get us wrong there, because if you ask us, most of those vehicles look like Star Wars and look really good. I mean, we like the looks, but the story and huge amount of rehash destroys it all for us, mostly because we know that it's made only with nostalgia and aims to get as much money out of our pockets with it. We know that movies are made for money as usual, but ever since The Force Awakens came out, they're using the same formula of nostalgia and succeeding. I mean, how much of the same things do people need to see to finally say that it's enough? Every trailer for anything Star Wars has stormtroopers, TIE fighters, X-Wings, and of course the Millennium Falcon.
They can also bring in your favorite hero ships, including the iconic Millennium Falcon.
We know that the same thing is going on with The Last Jedi, as seen with everything released about it so far, but we're still hoping that we're wrong. Okay, so here's why we think that. The vehicles in The Last Jedi also have very minor differences to the original trilogy versions of them. There are 19 years in between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope, and 30 years in between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens. Look at how huge of a difference there is in between the prequel era and the original trilogy era design-wise. For example, the AT-T Walker and the AT-AT Walker, which are completely differently designed. But now comes the AT-AT Walker compared to the Episode 8 AT-M6 Guerrilla Walker. In short, the AT-M6 compared to the AT-AT Walker is
so much bigger.
I only know one truth. Jedi to end.
Mustn't make it a smaller threat than it was, so why not put everything on steroids? It also has a new paint job as well as some smaller differences all around it, but all in all, there is no doubt that they're trying to replicate The Empire Strikes Back because money. Hashtag what would George Lucas do? The answer is be creative as hell, as he always was, as well as pay attention to every single detail.
I didn't care whether it was a hit or not a hit. I wanted to make this movie as a movie. And that's the thing that they won't do. And that they can't do it. It's not in their constitution to do that. You know, I have a fiduciary duty to come up with a thing. I got it 10% a year, my stockholders. That's why I would never go public. And that's why I said, I'm not going to be beholden to anybody. And that's why even now with the company, when I sold it, one of the reasons I sold it was I was starting to make movies that were more personal and were obviously losing a lot of money. And I said, I really can't do this much more because the company will be dragged down. And I had 2,000 employees. So I had people to think about. So I said, the best way to handle this is to sell it and then take the money, put it in a bank account. I call it my yacht. because a lot of my friends have yachts. I said, I'm not going to buy a yacht, but I'll take the money that I would use to have a yacht, and I'll put it in a bank account, and I will use that to make movies that I know are experimental, that I have no way of knowing whether they'll work or not, but I want to see if they work.
Now the other scoundrel, Todd, is gonna take over.
Okay, so those were all the details, but the main reason why I really dislike The Force Awakens and the sequels is because how relevant it makes the previous stories to be. Let's pretend that we don't consider Episode 6 as the happy ending and The Force Awakens and the sequels came out. Episode 6's ending is a happy one, there's no doubt about that. Episode 7 tells us that Han left Leia and his son Ben for smuggling. Luke Skywalker, after seeing his academy be destroyed by Han Solo's son, goes into a self-imposed exile and basically runs away from the galaxy. The Empire is back and repainted into the First Order and also has an even more powerful weapon than the Death Stars were. Han left Leia instead of being with her all the way. Luke left the whole galaxy because his academy was destroyed and his nephew fell to the dark side. The heroes we see in Return of the Jedi are pretty much gone. Luke ran away like a coward while the whole galaxy needed him again. So what happened? Did basically everything go downward as soon as Episode 6 ended? Why is this story starting all over again as if they did nothing in the original trilogy? What did Vader, aka Anakin, change by bringing balance to the Force? The answer is pretty simple, he changed nothing thanks to the sequels. Our excitement for The Force Awakens was there because it could have been a creative and fun movie where we would see something we never saw before, no matter if it demolished Episode 6 to some point. Our excitement died when we saw New Hope 2.0 in the theaters. It wasn't original in the slightest. Basically, the only three things we find creative in the movie is Kylo Ren's design, BB-8's design, and the cross-guard lightsaber. The rest of it is just rehash after rehash, and yes, we know about them playing it safe, but as far as I can see they're still playing it safe with The Last Jedi, judging by how many similarities it has to The Empire Strikes Back without the movie even coming out. Let's hope we're wrong and we wish we were. All we're saying is that the sequels don't support the existing stories at all, and tell you that they don't matter. Now the prequels on the other hand completely supported the original trilogy because it led to it, yet people complain about the CGI which was new at the time. That is the main reason for us disliking the sequels already without seeing the whole trilogy. But then we have seen The Force Awakens and it has huge plot holes in it, and Rey, Mary Sue. Mary Sue is a character that can do anything out of the thin air, for example the Jedi mind trick, even though she just found out a few hours ago that the Jedi actually existed and the Force as well. Now I think that there's no reason for us going into details with her because she is simply a boring, bland, badly written, good at everything character which everyone in the movie likes for no apparent reason, yet we really dislike her. The Force Awakens is a movie that you can't understand without reading a ton of books and comics that actually explain a single thing about the state of the galaxy and what actually happened. If you need something apart from the movie to explain why something happened in the movie, that means that it's not a good movie. The entire movie is completely based on nostalgia, and apparently that's really good for business, especially because people eat that crap up, and it's still being served and making billions. Now don't get me wrong guys, there's nothing wrong with having nostalgic moments in a movie, but having the whole movie be about that, and not only that, but the whole franchise, then there's something wrong. If they actually cared for Star Wars, which apparently they don't, wouldn't they add a bit more to the movies than just the most basic stuff we've all seen before? Not only that, but everything they throw out is based in the original trilogy era. Let's take Rogue One for example. Even though it was surprisingly a very creative movie, it was still based in the original trilogy and again on nostalgia. Star Wars Rebels, which we also find very good, is yet again basically the original trilogy era. EA Battlefront, completely original trilogy era again. The comics and novels are 90% based in the original trilogy era. What happened to the prequels? Are they even canon anymore? Where's the content from that? Oh, I know. Maybe because Disney Lucasfilm believes that the majority hate the prequel trilogy, so they don't want to do anything with it, because it probably won't make money. And yes, we know we got the prequels in Battlefront 2, but the thing is that Lucasfilm belongs to Disney for 5 years now in this point in time, and they only managed to release a few comics and add the prequels to Battlefront. We think that that's just pathetic. By the way, regarding the prequels, if CGI is the reason why some people don't like those movies, I mean what the hell? Do people not get that it was a brand new technique at the time that George worked to create? All we're gonna say is let's see if any of today's directors can make the prequels without the use of CGI where George used it, especially at the time where it was brand new. Also don't forget that The Phantom Menace alone had more practical sets than any other Star Wars movie. All in all, I think all of those reasons for hating the prequels are something people hear and then simply adopt and think, that's what the masses think, which is basically jumping on the bandwagon. We have never heard an actual reason for hating the prequels apart from the CGI, Jar Jar, and bad scripts, which we bloody love.
I don't like sand. It's coarse and rough and irritating, and it gets everywhere.
Yet the actual story is so complex, and not to mention that, you see so many new things in each movie, especially Revenge of the Sith. Did you know that in episode 3 alone, you have at least 30 new never-before-seen vehicles and about 20 different types of clone troopers, and not to mention hundreds of other details? We know that because we do videos on all of those things, and there is just so much in those movies which the sequels greatly lack. Or as Palpy would say, "You will pay the price for your lack of vision." Regarding Star Wars fans, some of them say from time to time in the comments and everywhere else that the expanded universe is good for nothing, has a lot of continuity errors, and that they prefer the official canon. The continuity errors are the main reason why we hear that they dislike it, as well as because it's old while the canon is new? What the hell does that mean anyway? Nevertheless, we have something to say about that, and that is that almost everything you see in official canon comes from the expanded universe. Yet when it's not canon, it's crap to you, but when it gets officially canonized, then it's pure awesomeness, and you can see all the Facebook pages and YouTube channels posting and saying, "Hey, it's canon!" It really disgusts us to see canon fanboys that hate the source of their canon that they so dearly love. Don't get us wrong, we're not bashing canon, because as we said before, we merge both EU and canon before Return of the Jedi in our headcanon, and we wouldn't be doing that if we didn't like the stories. When people do what we just talked about, it's called hypocrisy, without most of them even knowing. They dislike something they never played, read, or did any research on. Or maybe it's just jumping on the bandwagon with what others say, or being up to date with what's trending. We really don't care about the reasons, we're just sick of getting that stuff in the comments. And this video is getting it out in the open. Also, since you probably think canon is perfect and without continuity errors, here's one for you. In the last Padawan Kanon comic book, we see Ortolans who somehow, out of thin air, once don't have arms, because, you know, new canon changes, which is by our opinion really idiotic. Yet in the Forces of Destiny, we see an Ortolan with hands, and it's also officially canon. It's just one example of many. Now, since we mentioned Forces of Destiny, all there is to say about it is its feminism at its highest and finest, thanks to Kathleen Kennedy, of course. That is not the worst part of it, because the small story arcs they do are all officially canon, yet they make no sense whatsoever, most of them being huge continuity errors. I mean, you want to tell me that in The Force Awakens, Rey had time to be chased by speeders, yet it wasn't in the movie? Oh yeah, I know why it wasn't in the movie, because something like it didn't happen in episode 4. Forces of Destiny is something no one should ever watch, and that's not because of the low quality animation compared to Rebels and Clone Wars, but because of the intensified forward agenda pushing. We are done with this, so moving on. Now we have come to the conclusion that Star Wars fans are one of the reasons why we have a hard time enjoying Star Wars, as well as making us want to have absolutely nothing with the fanbase most of the time. From all the franchises we're fans of, Star Wars definitely has the worst fans, and here's a few reasons for that. When you like or dislike something, which each of us is allowed to do, as well as share our opinion, most of them immediately start to hate you to the core because they don't agree with your opinion. Conversations with Star Wars fans do not exist anymore, and all that's left is hating each other for liking or disliking different things. Having a YouTube channel means you can do whatever you want on it, especially share your opinion on anything, yet people in our comments section demand that we don't do some stuff like, for example, saying what we personally consider as canon and what we don't. Basically, they're allowed to shit on our videos in the comments section and share their opinions, while the creators of the videos, which actually do something real in their computer, are not allowed to speak freely in their own videos.
Go fuck yourself.
Our friend Boofire191 did a video on this specific topic, and we highly recommend it because it's about time someone speaks up about this issue. The link will be below for his video. Now tell me, is Han Solo one of the most popular Star Wars characters? Yes, he is. And why are we getting a standalone Han Solo movie? Because they think it will make money because of that fact. The entire filming of the movie has been going very badly, and we would rather see it cancelled. Harrison Ford as Han Solo cannot be replaced by anyone, the same way Hugh Jackman cannot be replaced as Wolverine and Johnny Depp as Captain Jack Sparrow. We personally think that the Han Solo movie might even be worse than The Force Awakens, if that's even possible. Oh, and don't forget, it's again based in the original trilogy, full of nostalgia with the Millennium Falcon. So far, we haven't seen anyone hyped even the slightest for this thing, and we simply think that it's doomed to fail. We wish it was different, but it isn't. As far as it seems, they're making Star Wars movies for the sake of making Star Wars movies, and not because they're untold stories which are really needed for the actual plot of Star Wars, which, as if we recall, ended in Episode 6. Star Wars is being milked until there is absolutely nothing left with this once amazing franchise. Never has there been a so greedy and money-hungry company like Disney Lucasfilm. Moving on to Rogue One, a Star Wars story, which is by our opinion a masterpiece in how it's done, although it has its flaws with character development. We expected this movie to also be only based in nostalgia for the original trilogy, but surprisingly, even if it's basically hours from A New Hope, it had so many new things to show us, from places and characters to new, never-before-seen vehicles. Unlike The Force Awakens, which repainted everything from A New Hope. Rogue One not only was creative, it also had a ton of Star Wars Rebels, original trilogy, prequel trilogy, Clone Wars, Old Republic, and expanded universe Easter eggs. Unlike The Force Awakens, which only had Easter eggs from the original trilogy, Rogue One was so well done that it fits into our headcanon without a problem, even if there already are stories in the EU about stealing of the Death Star plans. By the way, we have a video on that, how Rogue One fits into the EU in the time period. Although with Rogue One and The Force Awakens, we can clearly see how Kathleen Kennedy is pushing her agendas into the movies and making women main characters all the time. Not only that, but in The Force Awakens, we have seen men having to be wimps so that the woman can be strong and independent compared to them. It's as if the men have to be weak for the women to be strong. Now that is an agenda we've been seeing since The Force Awakens. Since when has Star Wars never had a strong female character? Please explain that to me. Princess Leia was basically always more of a leader than Han and Luke. Padme Amidala, strong and able to take care of herself. Ahsoka Tano. Need I say more? Star Wars never had a problem with everyone being equal, yet agendas are being pushed in Disney's Star Wars, as if Star Wars before had all those problems, which it didn't. Now, one thing we have to mention is that we don't understand how the same studio made Rogue One and The Force Awakens. Rogue One is so much superior to The Force Awakens in so many ways. It's as if people didn't care for The Force Awakens at all, but in Rogue One, everyone gave their best. Here's just a comparison in the space battles, for example. At the Battle of Scarif, how many TIE Fighters, X-Wings, Y-Wings, Nebula MB frigates, Hammerheads, Mon Calamari ships do you see? We don't know, but quite a few. And how many X-Wings do you see at the Battle of Starkiller Base? I count 12 tops, yet on Wikipedia it says that the Resistance had at least 17. That is really pathetic if you ask me. Look at the Battle of Yavin in A New Hope. It had more than 12 vehicles attacking the Death Star, and they were not all X-Wings but Y-Wings as well. Look at the Battle of Endor in Return of the Jedi. I count quite a few as well, and not only that, but there you can also see more new vehicles added, such as the A-Wings, B-Wings, TIE Interceptors, etc. Let's go to the prequel trilogy. Oh, that much. As you can see, the numbers are not in fighters, but in the frickin' Venator class Star Destroyers. The same goes for Knights of the Old Republic 1 and 2, Star Wars The Old Republic MMORPG game, the Force Unleashed games, and of course the Clone Wars. None of them were lazy or uncreative. There's nothing more that needs to be said about Rogue One. For us, it's personally a masterpiece in its own way, even with its flaws. Next up is Star Wars Episode 8 The Last Jedi. Now this movie isn't out yet, so we can't say much about it, other than what we think about it now with all the trailers and info we have so far. We personally really don't want the movie to be a rehash of The Empire Strikes Back, but to us it really does look like it's gonna be that. Let us all hope that we're wrong, and let us hope we have fun watching it and enjoying it. Now the first teaser trailer for the movie already showed us a few similarities to The Empire Strikes Back. Luke training Rey, which is a mirror of Yoda training Luke. By the way, how Rey started her story in The Force Awakens, we actually think that she will train Luke in The Last Jedi. Also, we gotta look at the Resistance skimmers attacking some walkers in the distance, which is of course a mirror of the walker assault at the Battle of Hoth. These are already too many similarities for only a teaser trailer if you ask me. Now speaking of the teaser trailer, there is a line by Luke Skywalker at the end in which he says,
"It's time for the Jedi to end."
Anyway, if this means what I think it means, then do I need to remind you what the name of Episode 6 is? It's Return of the Jedi, and if this line in the teaser trailer means what we think it means, then what Luke says here is totally irrelevant, as is everything else.
You failed, Your Highness. I am a Jedi, like my father before me.
That is a thing that bugs us more than anything about The Last Jedi, because it demolishes everything that happened before, even more than The Force Awakens already did. Now, even if we'll never consider it as canon for ourselves, let's hope that that line is set in a completely different context and is not true. If you remember, we briefly talked about the new Gorilla Walker repainting. Well, the same thing is going on here with the A-Wing repaint, which isn't white and red anymore, but red and white, or blue and white, or whatever. The point is it's completely the same design-wise, and nothing has changed except that they will say it's faster and better now in The Last Jedi visual guide. Now we can't say anything bad about the aliens in the movie because we have seen some of them and there's no arguing there about creativity for them. Personally, we kinda like the look of the porgs and the small alien figure in the casino in Canto Bight. They look awesome, definitely. Anyway, before we get deeper into The Last Jedi stuff, I'd like to go over what we actually like from it before seeing it. One thing we like are the ski speeders, which are seen during the Battle of Craid. They seem very bizarre and original, but remind us a lot of Star Trek vehicles, which of course isn't a bad thing. The island Luke Skywalker is on is pure beauty and simply amazing. The people that chose Skellig Islands for Luke's exile did a great job, although when I think about it, the actual creator of the place deserves the credit, and not really them for just picking it as beautiful as it is. So moving on. Snoke's Praetorian Guards look very awesome in our opinion and are very nicely designed, although there is a problem with them. The thing is that it's very clear rehashing of the Emperor's Royal Guards, which I don't applaud even if they look good, because the sequels are littered with repainted stuff from the original trilogy. Other than that, they look really good, but the rehashing has become very annoying and it ruins it a lot. Here's an example of the Old Republic, in which you can also see the Red Imperial Guards. They were also inspired by Sidious's Imperial Guards, just as were Snoke's. But the key difference here is that they are only a small inspiration from the original trilogy, and the rest of the Old Republic era is completely newly designed in at least 95% of its stuff. But the sequels basically took, aka rehashed, 95% of the original trilogy and added only a few new things. Another vehicle we like is the Resistance Bomber, because it really looks new and we like it without a specific reason. The things we liked from The Force Awakens also apply to The Last Jedi, and they are BB-8, who's simply awesome, and the crossguard lightsaber, as well as his owner's design with the helmet. All the other things also look good, like the X-Wings and stuff we already saw in the original trilogy, but it's completely rehashed and that's what makes it bad. It's basically the same dilemma, just as with the Praetorian Guards. We think that taking existing ideas, repainting them, and saying that it's brand new doesn't deserve a shred of respect. So that's basically our whole point. All of it looks great in The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. Well, almost all of it. But the thing is, it has such a high rate of already existing repainted vehicles that you ought to think about how much money grabbing and lazy they actually are. We heard a lot of people defend these so-called new designs with something story-wise, like that the First Order is using old designs which are now only upgraded because they have much smaller resources than the old Empire. Yet they're able to build Starkiller Base, aka Death Star 3, making it 10 times bigger and more powerful, and not to mention making bigger and stronger Star Destroyers, walkers, and stuff like that. What we call that is butthurt fans making excuses for Lucasfilm's lack of imagination in the movie. But the simple truth is they lack imagination, don't care, or are actually rebooting Star Wars without us knowing. Okay, that last one was a joke, but our point stands. Also, we think that when Luke Skywalker from the first The Last Jedi teaser trailer says,
"We're so much bigger,"
he actually basically means it. Anyway, a follow-up video to this one will be made, or is made, depending on which point in time you're watching this. It will purely be, or already is, on The Last Jedi, whether it's good or bad by our opinion. So moving on. We have heard quite a few times of how Mark Hamill is unhappy with where his character story is going.
I said to Ryan, I said, I think I fundamentally disagree with pretty much everything you've decided for me.
When I read 8, I told Ryan, I fundamentally disagree with virtually everything you've decided about my character. But, you know, other than that, I can't really describe more, but it was as shocking to me to read what Ryan had written as I'm sure it will be for the audience.
But not only that, in the beginning when The Force Awakens was being planned, he really didn't want to mess with it, but since Carrie Fisher and Harrison Ford accepted, he did as well.
Did you ever think for a second, I don't want to go back, it was so great at the time? Were you kind of ambivalent about it?
I was terrified. I thought, look, why mess with the success? We're never going to catch lightning in a bottle again. We had a beginning, a middle, and an end. Let's let the memories suffice. And I said, you know what? My out is that Harrison's never going to do this. So I said to my wife, I said, as soon as Harrison turns it down, I probably won't, but it'll at least give me an out. And then Harrison said yes. I turned to my wife and said, well, I just got drafted.
How hard was it to persuade you to come back for this film?
Well, I thought if they do more movies, they're not going to ask us back. We had a beginning, a middle, and an end. George told us that if you didn't want to come back, we wouldn't recast your part, we'd write you out. And as I left that meeting, I said to my wife, it's like we were drafted. I mean, how am I supposed to say no? I'd be the most hated man on the planet. I mean, there would be fans outside my house like the angry villagers in a Frankenstein picture with lightsabers instead of torches. So, I mean, there's no wiggle room. I thought, well, you got to do it. But that's what we do. That's what I'm in this business. I only want to make people happy, and these films make people very happy. I said, you guys, I have a very bad feeling about this, which is a famous line from the film. I said, maybe we should have just left well enough alone. You know, we had a beginning, a middle, and end.
We believe that Mark Hamill is very disappointed in what's happening with his character and is simply telling us the truth about it, which we can see in a number of videos.
Well, did you hear the last line of the teaser? What was it?
Well, that the Jedi needs to end.
Yeah. Well, there you go. I mean, that Yoda and Obi-Wan didn't feel that, did they? Yeah.
And then of course we mustn't forget when Kathleen interrupted Mark for telling the truth, aka doing her damage control thing.
They allude to things that have happened, and to a certain extent, you know, it's not Luke's story anymore. But I think he's an important part of the overall arc of the saga, and again, there's a lot of mystery about him, even within the film.
I'm just going to break in here and make sure that everybody out there realizes he is so significantly important to this next film. You have no idea.
Well, that's good to hear.
It is apparent that Mark cares for Star Wars and is disappointed about it, but what can he do? Sadly, nothing. Basically, one of the reasons why he's even able to say as much as he did is because he's irreplaceable and the only Luke Skywalker there is, so they simply cannot do anything about it. If a movie is made with the term playing it safe, that says a lot about how relevant and important that movie is to the entire franchise. We're talking about The Force Awakens here specifically, and how important to episodes 1 to 6 it is. The answer is that it's not important at all, since the story has been finished with episode 6. It exists for no apparent reason except that they wanted money. Playing it safe is a term for something that is not important and is there to see how it does with the people. We believe that the sequel trilogy is completely meaningless story-wise and that it shouldn't exist because all of its stories are being made up as they go along, which implies that they have no idea where the stuff they are doing with the movies is leading.
And I think he has more leeway to really mess things up. It's Colin Trevorrow that's going to have to tie all the loose ends together.
The scripts are being made movie after movie because there is no vision for the entirety of the trilogy. That means that while making the first 2 movies of the trilogy, not even they know where the stories lead. This is an issue that episodes 1 to 6 didn't have a problem with because it was always known whose story was it about and where it was supposed to lead to. That being freeing the galaxy from the tyranny of the Empire, bringing balance to the Force, and bringing peace to the galaxy. Now just to briefly push this topic in, which is out of place in this horribly structured video. Saying that, we just want to say that Star Wars Battlefront 2 is very nicely done, but kind of insults most of the Star Wars universe by saying all 3 eras in the trailers and in the game.
Over 14 locations to explore across all 3 Star Wars eras.
That implies that Star Wars that isn't canon anymore isn't Star Wars or doesn't matter, which is completely untrue. Just because something was wrongly thrown away doesn't mean that it's now not important. Keep the expanded universe alive and remember that there is way more than 3 eras. In order to be fair, they should have simply put 3 main Star Wars eras or just 3 big Star Wars eras instead of all 3, which is of course untrue. And again, sorry for pushing this Battlefront 2 topic in the middle of something, but we really didn't know where to add it in this video, and we just want to say everything on our minds. Anyway, moving on. One of the reasons why Lucasfilm is succeeding with Star Wars is because of how fans simply don't care about the content and just that there is more and more of it. A lot of them don't understand Star Wars and just want there to be more and more stuff for the sake of there being more stuff. Just as Lucasfilm is making Star Wars movies for the sake of making Star Wars movies. That is called blind loyalty, and with that blind loyalty comes defending stuff that doesn't make sense, like at least half of The Force Awakens. Some of it includes comparing real-life history with a fictional universe. Like for example, saying that the reason why The Force Awakens has almost the same vehicle designs like the original trilogy is the same thing as World War II vehicles being very similar to modern day ones. Another one of our favorites is saying that history repeats itself because of 2 reasons. Number 1 is because in real life there is always more war and never eternal peace, and that's why The Force Awakens is completely legit and Return of the Jedi is actually not the happy ending, which by the way was meant to be regarding the creator of Star Wars.
What if someone else beside you came to you and said, I want to make episode 7? Could you see that happening?
No.
No, absolutely, positively, you're really closing the door without any wiggle room whatsoever.
Right. There is no episode 7.
Even for someone else to come up with.
Well, there's possibility there may be another offshoot movie somewhere about an offshoot character in that world.
But not episode
But not about
7.
Luke Skywalker, not about that group of people and that struggle to bring democracy back to the galaxy.
Women.
Just a reminder that Star Wars is a fictional universe in which anything you can think of can be put into it. With that said, after so many stories from the beginning of the galaxy all the way up to episode 6, through so much struggle to save the galaxy, instead of finally making it a better world, they destroy everything everyone fought for, all because they want more money. And at number 2 is using George's own words that the Star Wars movies are like poetry and rhyme together, which is the so-called justifying The Force Awakens' existence and there being no real peace and only more war.
That with Anakin, kind of duplicating the Luke Skywalker role, but you see the echo of where it all is going to go. And instead of destroying the Death Star, he destroys the ship that controls the robots. Again, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme. Every stanza kind of rhymes with the last one. Hopefully it'll work.
Also, we mustn't forget the mirroring excuse that fans use all the time to justify the designs in the sequel trilogy, like the walkers from The Last Jedi being very similar to the AT-ATs from The Empire Strikes Back. But the real mirroring in this specific example is episode 2, having walkers which are by the way completely different than the AT-ATs, while being in the second movie of the trilogy, just as it is in episode 5. The excuses to defend the sequel trilogy is not actual mirroring, but instead goes by the name of rehashing and nothing else. After hearing all we had to say about what's happening to Star Wars, don't you guys want the new Star Wars content that is being released to actually be creative, new, make sense to the actual main story, and not make the existing stories completely irrelevant? If so, stop giving them what they want, because excuses like playing it safe with the movie and other ones we mentioned only bring them easy money without them putting real effort into the story and only good CGI. And now one more thing to the fans. Let's not pretend that almost all of you that have had no knowledge about the expanded universe didn't think that there was something after episode 6. Because a lot of you judge us for what we feel is right to us, and that being episode 6 as the happy ending, yet before The Force Awakens came out, you didn't even know stuff after episode 6 existed, and now you call us idiots because of it. Since TFA exists, it means that it should exist, and we're idiots for believing otherwise. Well, wrong. Just because it exists, it doesn't mean at all that it should. We grew up loving Star Wars and believing that the 6 movies were the complete saga as it was then, and to add to that, explore the other reaches of the franchise that happened in between the movies and before them. Even though there are stories in the EU based after episode 6, we still consider it the finale nonetheless. By the way, depending on which point in time you're watching this video, there will be or is a video about why Return of the Jedi should be the happy ending, where we go step by step through Star Wars history and why it's actually meant to be that way. The link will be or is below. Anyway guys, thank you so much for watching this horribly put together video, and we hope we cleared everything you ever asked for regarding all of these things. Also, sorry if we contradicted ourselves in this video at some point, because as you saw, it's badly structured because of so much info. We've been feeling very bitter towards Star Wars because of most of these things, and that is something we really don't need or want. By letting all of this out in the open, we think that we can now focus on absolutely everything we love in Star Wars without all of the negative things that we feel about it. We've been under a lot of stress regarding the comments section on our channel regarding headcanon and not liking the sequels, but now thankfully we will never have to talk about it again because of this video. We know this is a very risky video to make, especially if you have a Star Wars based YouTube channel, but we simply had to do it because we think it's about time we get some actual quality Star Wars, instead of constant original trilogy rehashing, as well as for the fans to realize what Star Wars should be and what they're getting right now. If we the fans continue to give them what they want and eat everything that they serve, then we will never get past the playing it safe zone. We feel so sorry for the new generations of Star Wars fans that are growing up with Disney's reboot trilogy because they will simply never understand what real Star Wars is, or should I say was. Again, thank you guys so much for hearing us out, and God bless. Also remember, this is how you lose subscribers.
This party's over.